Well, shalom, my dear friends, and welcome to our Genesis Bible study. We're getting close to the end. Today we'll be in chapter 46, which is the story of the family of Jacob, including Jacob himself, leaving their home in the Promised Land, which then was called Canaan, and traveling down to Egypt. So we will jump into our preliminary material. At this point in the video, I usually suggest that for those of you who are only interested in the verse-by-verse study to fast forward ahead through our background and preliminary PowerPoint material, and we'll meet you at the Bible software part. You can certainly do that today, but before you do, I'll mention that I've taken out a lot of the material from the background stuff, so it's going to be kind of a shortened version, a Reader's Digest version of our background material, because we have progressed past a lot of the things in the early generations of the patriarchs that we don't need to review that stuff at this point in our studies. So here we go with background stuff. I will continue to advertise my latest book called Nazarene Essene Theology. This is a systematic theology of the Jewish sects of the Nazarenes and the Essenes. It appears that the Essenes were the like the mother group and gave birth to the Nazarenes. The Essenes were celibate monks, and the Nazarenes were seculars, and so they were married and raised families and so forth. And according to the New Testament, Yeshua was a Nazarene. Jesus belonged to the sect of the Nazarenes. But the reason I'm recommending this book for this video series is because there's a lot of material in the book that is drawn from the book of Genesis, some really in-depth stuff. So if that might be of interest to you, you might find it helpful as we continue to go through the book of Genesis. We've also been using a series of dispensational charts. This is the fourth dispensation that we're looking at. It's called the patriarchal dispensation, or period of stewardship history, biblical history, because it includes the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and the Yaakov. And then the fourth generation includes the sons of Yaakov, which will play a prominent role in the study we have for today. We will go through kind of a brief genealogy of the 12 sons and one daughter, Dinah. Remember her? She apparently went down to Egypt also. And it talks about the sons and the grandsons of Jacob. So in the text for today, we'll even see a fifth and what would it be? Perhaps a fifth generation, a fourth and fifth generation. That goes down to Egypt. Remember, the red line of redemption, or the road to salvation, goes through each one of the patriarchs and through the tribe of Judah, which is the tribe that was selected by God for nobility. And Judah is going to kind of be a standout today. The Messiah is going to be from this tribe. So he is, by birth, by genealogy, a king. And although he did not take a physical throne in the first century, I, for one, believe he could have if his people had received him, recognized him for who he was, and received him not only as the Lord and Savior, but the rightful King of Israel. I do believe that the Messianic kingdom could have begun in that century. And one of the saddest things about that first New Testament era century is that the kingdom did not manifest. And for 2,000 years, the Jewish people of Israel have had to move around and live from place to place, and they've been persecuted just about everywhere they lived. So, yeah. This Bible chart takes us all the way up to Egypt, which we will not, or to Egypt, which we are covering in this Genesis study. But the Exodus begins in the book of Exodus. And I don't think I'm going to do a video series on Exodus. I may change my mind about that. But I kind of want to get back to the New Testament because that's kind of my favorite area. But the Exodus takes place in the book of Exodus, and then Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And there's a new chart for that, which you can't see yet. I keep having to look and see. This is the fifth chart in this series by Alfred Ede. He is the theologian and the artist who published these charts. And although he passed away some time ago, his family continues the publishing of these books of charts. It's called Oak Knoll Publishing. So you can find it on the internet. You can, there are actually 4 books of charts. This is the main one. And I think it's called God's Plan for the Ages or something like that. So you can get these from the publishing company at a pretty decent price. You may also be able to find them on Amazon or eBay. I get a lot of I get a lot of my theological reading material from Amazon and eBay. And by the way, if you're interested in my book that I'm recommending, Amazon is the best place to get that also. We want to look at the map of the journeys of Joseph. The green arrow on the map shows the starting point at Dothan, where Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, and then the probable path that he took down into the land of Egypt. I don't know that Avaris is the actual place where he arrived. It may very well be, or it may be Heliopolis, or I suppose the Egyptian word for that is On, or Noph, Memphis, one of these other places, either on the map or not. And then the red arrow here shows the travels of Joseph's brothers and Jacob's journey to Canaan. So we know that the brothers of Joseph made one trip down to Egypt, and then they came back. Then they made another trip down to Egypt, where Joseph revealed himself to them. And then they come back again to Canaan to get their dad and bring him and the whole family down to Egypt, because there's still, what was it, 5 more years of famine left in the prophetic 7 years of plenty and prosperity, followed by 7 years of famine and drought and starvation and destruction and so forth. In our story for today, in our chapter for today, the first verse or two is going to say that Yaakov, Jacob, the still living patriarch, traveled from Mamre, which is nowadays called Hebron. That's the place of the cave of Machpelah, which Abraham bought from the Hittites who lived in that area. So that's the family burial plot, and the successive generations of Israelites kind of gravitated around that place because that was where the family members were going to be buried, in the cave of Machpelah. So he leaves there. Yaakov leaves there with his whole family, and they go down to Beersheba, which is, I don't know how far that is. What would that be? About 20 miles, it looks like. And he will worship there, and then the Lord will appear to him and give him some kind of guidance and direction, and so forth. There was something else I was going to point out on this map, but I don't remember what it was. So if I do remember as we go through the text, maybe we'll come back and revisit that. So let me go ahead and go to our Bible software program. This is Accordance. I think this is still the free version. I think I'm still using the free version. Of course, any of the reference materials that you use have to be purchased from Accordance, but they are well worth it. The English text we'll be looking at is the New King James Version, which I find very scholarly and which is my go-to version. There are a couple others that I have found, but I keep coming back to the New King James Version. And this one has a lot of original language information that you can see in the information window down at the bottom of the screen. So yeah, New King James Version. Then we have the BHS, the Hebrew Old Testament, and we have the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. And then in the fourth column over here on the right, we have Dake's, Finest Dake's study Bible material, his commentary material, which I find very good. There are a few things that I disagree with, but in general, I find it very good and helpful. He's got a lot of original language material, which is my fave. He's pretty good with it. So yeah, that's the those are the resources that we'll be looking at today. So Genesis 46, verse 1. So Israel took his journey with all that he had, and he came to Beersheba. And we saw that on the map, 20 miles south from Hebron. And he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Um, uh, Offering sacrifices was the way people worshiped in those days. And it's a little bit different from the way worship is today. Nowadays, it is centered around usually musical worship and things like that, readings and references from the Holy Scriptures. Now, in the New Covenant, we practice the Lord's Supper or Holy Communion. We do baptism, very different in the Old Testament times. Since Jesus has come, we don't offer animal sacrifices anymore because the animal sacrifices were a type and kind of an illustration. I like the term divine drama that kind of depicted and reminded biblical people about the way their salvation would be won by the sacrifice of an innocent Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. So we are now under the New Covenant. The material we're studying was Old Covenant material, but actually the material we have here in Genesis even predates the Old Covenant that God made with Moses and the law of Moses, which governed that. And we have seen that the rules and regulations, the expectations in this Genesis era of biblical history are different from the time when the law of Moses was given. And then, of course, the New Testament era, the rules and regulations are different. Circumcision is no longer required. Sabbath observation is no longer required. Dietary regulations no longer required, and so on and so forth, because we're living under the new covenant. We now live in the age of grace. Probably would have been a good idea for me to use the age of grace or the church age Bible charts from Eads book of Bible charts, just to kind of show the contrast and illustrate some of those things. But that would have taken longer. So here Israel is taking his journey, and remember that the name Israel is the changed name that God gave to Yaakov. And I have a theory, as we continue to study this, you can see if you agree with the theory or not, that when Yaakov is behaving like a man of faith in a great relationship with God and trusting God and acting on his faith and growing in holiness and sanctification and things like that, that he's referred to in the Bible as Israel, which is not only his name, but it's also the name of the nation that will develop in Egypt while the family is staying there. So it tells us that Israel, the godly man, took his journey with all he had, all of his household possessions. And remember, they were shepherds. So they lived in tents. They were accustomed to moving from place to place in order to provide pasture for the sheep and the goats and the camels and all of the animals that they took care of. So this kind of a herdsman families, the cattlemen, they were well suited to transferring their residents from the land of Canaan down to Egypt. So he took all he had with him in the carts that Joseph and the Pharaoh had provided for them. So they loaded up all their goods and they came to Beersheba. Beersheba means the well of the promise. And there he offered sacrifices. We've talked about that to the God of his father Isaac. Now, Dake says it's 25 miles. I said 20, so Dake's probably measured it out. So we'll go with 25. And Dake also says here that when the Bible refers to the God of his father Isaac, Dake points out that the God of Isaac and not the God of Abraham, for Isaac had taught him about God. I think Dake is trying to make more out of this nomenclature than is necessary. He specifically says it's not the God of Abraham, as if the God of Abraham is a different God than the God of Isaac. Now, I know Dake didn't believe that, but um, you might come to that conclusion by the fact that Dake says not Abraham, not the God of Abraham, but it's the same God. But it was Isaac who taught Yaakov, Israel, all about God. So his religious education came from his father Isaac. Let's go on. Let's move on here to verse 2. Then God spoke to Israel in the visions of the night. Now, some people would call this a dream. Some people would call it a vision because even though it happened at night, Yaakov may have been wide awake. He may not have been sleeping at night because he may have been worried about something. We'll talk about what he may have been worried about as we get the content of this vision, this revelation that he has. So God spoke to Israel in the visions of the night, and he said, Yaakov, Yaakov. Now, this is where the name that is given here is interesting because in verse 2 itself, it refers to Yaakov as Israel, which is a good thing. It's a complimentary thing. And if I'm right, this could be kind of a reprimand. Yaakov, Yaakov, like, where's your faith, buddy? And he said, Yitzhak said, here I am. Hineni. Hineni in Hebrew is the response everybody gives when God shows up in a vision or when an angel shows up and speaks to them. They just say Hineni. So if you ever are having a dream or if you feel like you're getting kind of an angelic visitation or something like that, Hineni is a good answer. And maybe the angel or God will be impressed that you know a little bit of Hebrew. So Hineni, here I am, behold me. So he, with a capital H, he said, that's God. That's the way the New King James hints to you or indicates to you that this is one of the divine persons speaking. Father, Son, or Holy Spirit? I don't know. And so he said, I am God. I am Elohim, the God of your father. God doesn't say your father. So God doesn't seem to be including Abraham in this. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. So I think God knew what was going on in Jacob's mind or Israel's mind. uh, Something may have been troubling him, like I say, and oftentimes when things are troubling me, it keeps me awake at night. And oftentimes God will kind of show up and either direct me, encourage me, comfort me if that's what I need, give me some peace in like troubled times. So I don't know, I guess that commonality of personal experience kind of leads me to believe that maybe Yaakov was hesitant to go down to Egypt. So why might he have been hesitant? Well, the text here tells us that Isaac, Yitzhak, had been Yaakov's religious teacher, and he had undoubtedly given his son his personal testimony, which includes some interesting things that happened in Genesis chapter 26. In Genesis 26, the Lord appeared to Isaac, maybe in a vision, maybe in a dream, maybe just a kind of an audible revelation. And the Lord said to Isaac, do not go down to Egypt. Live in this, meaning the promised land, and I will be with you and bless you. So if Isaac had been told, don't go down to Egypt, and he had taught Jacob that like going down to Egypt, especially to live there in times of famine, which I think was what was going on in Genesis 26, then, you know, because God had told his father not to go down to Egypt, he may have been feeling kind of hesitant to go there. So God puts his fears to rest. He says, do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation. Where? There. So, you know, it was Genesis 26 was one of those times when the patriarchs demonstrated their fear and lack of faith in God, because as Abraham had done twice, Isaac met with Avimelech, not the Pharaoh, not Avimelech was not a Pharaoh, but he was a king of the Philistine, city state of Gerar. And when Isaac and Rebecca went to Gerar, I think because of a famine, Isaac was afraid to say that Rebecca was his wife because she was beautiful, and she was afraid that the Philistines who lived there in Gerar. I'm not even sure Philistines lived there at that time. Later, it would be a Philistine city. But anyway, Gentiles lived there. So Isaac was afraid to say that, you know, to introduce Rebecca as his wife. So he referred to her as his sister, which his grandfather had done, and now, or which his father had done, and now he was doing also, just for fear of his life. And the theory was that if the beautiful woman was your sister, they'd let you live and still have their way with your wife, which you're claiming is your sister. But if you said this is my wife, then they'd kill you to get the husband out of the way so they could have their way with your wife. So either way, the men of this family are afraid that the Gentiles are going to have their way with their women, and they do what they feel like they need to do to survive. So that's the story from Genesis 26. And that may be if Yaakov was feeling hesitant to go down to Egypt because of what God had said to his father. God puts that to rest, and he says, I want you down in Egypt. That's where I'm going to grow this family into a nation. Not only a nation, but a great nation. Gadol nation, a great nation. Yeah. Let's see. And the word he uses for nation there is goy, la goy gadol. Oftentimes it's is another word for nation, but no matter. Verse 4, I will go down with you to Egypt. And remember, God had said to Isaac, I will be with you like here in the promised land, and I'll take care of you. Now he is saying to Yaakov, whose circumstances are different, I will go with you to Egypt, and I will surely bring you up again. And Yosef will put his hand on your eyes. So God is promising that, yes, I intend for you to go down to Egypt, but in the future, I'm going to bring you back here. But the details he puts on this promise indicate that when Yaakov comes back to the promised land, he's not going to be alive. He will be deceased at that point. Because this phrase of Joseph putting his hand on your eyes is, oh, I don't know, kind of an illustrative way of saying that Joseph will be with you when you die. And when people die, normally their eyes are open. And so it requires somebody to close their eyelids so they don't look so creepy. Dake has a little bit on this, so we'll read through his stuff on Joseph putting his hand on thine eyes. Means he shall close your eyes in peace at death, as plainly translated in some versions. It was the custom for the nearest of kin to close the eyes and kiss the corpse at death. It must have been comforting to Jacob to know that his long-lost son would perform this in his case. And it's very clear in the scriptures that Joseph was the favorite son of Yaakov. So when Yaakov thought he had lost him, it was devastating for him. And now he's all encouraged again because now he knows that his son is alive. He'll see him again. There'll be a reunion. And Joseph, his favorite, will be with him when the time comes for him to pass away. And then his dead body will be brought back to the land of Canaan. Verse 5. Then Yaakov arose from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried their father Yaakov, their little ones, and their wives in the carts which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. So these sons of Yaakov are old enough to be married and have kids of their own. So the wives and the little ones who, might not be able to walk that far, they're going to get to ride in the carts. And probably the men will ride camels or donkeys or maybe horses, probably not horses. Yeah, they're going down in the carts. Okay, verse 6. So they took their livestock and their goods, which they had acquired in the land of Canaan. So this is like sort of like a wagon train, with cattle, probably lots of cattle, following along in the caravan. And they went to Egypt, Yaakov with all his descendants with him, his sons and his sons' sons. So that would be his sons and his grandsons, his daughters and his sons' daughters. Now, this is interesting because it uses the plural form, banotav, of the word daughters. And the Bible only tells us about one daughter, Dinah, which doesn't necessarily imply that there weren't other daughters, one or more additional daughters. So Dake says that Dinah and his son's daughters were considered the daughters of Yaakov, having come from his loins in kind of an indirect way through the sons. So this seems to be implying daughters-in-law or even the granddaughters being, considered Jacob's daughters. And it is true. The Hebrew language is a little uncomfortable with, there is no term in Hebrew for granddaughters. It usually just, says daughters of daughters or sons of sons. So it is a little awkward. But I guess the thing I want to emphasize is since the plural is used here, there may have been another daughter or more in the family that's just not mentioned here. Dinah is mentioned because she plays a prominent role in one of the chapters here. Now, these were the names of the children of Israel, Yaakov and his sons, who went to Mitzrayim, to Egypt, and now follows the genealogy. We'll go through this kind of quickly. There are some interesting little things we can mention in the genealogy. But at the when we come to the end of this genealogy, there's going to be a count. There's going to be a number of people that were in the caravan, and that number is going to be 70. But it's not going to count daughters. It's not going to count grandchildren. It's going to be oh, it does count. I'm sorry, it does count. Um, it counts sons and grandsons, okay, but not daughters. And I don't know if the age of the grandsons is important here, because if they're not adults, they might not be counted. Anyway, there's going to be a count at the end, and the number is going to be 70. And we will talk a little bit about how you come to that, number. So these are the names of the children of Israel, Jacob and his sons who went to Egypt. Reuven was Yaakov's firstborn, and so he's listed first. And Dave points out that the names in this genealogy are grouped according to the mother. So Leah is going to be mentioned first, and all the sons that she bore are going to be listed here because she was the one who bore the firstborn. She was the first of Jacob's wives, first class or second class wives, to bear children. So all her children are listed, and then it's followed by, I believe it's Zilpah, who was her maidservant, and she had two sons. So then they're listed, and the grandchildren are listed. Then Rachel is mentioned, and her two sons. And then Bilhah, I believe it was Bilhah, was her maidservant, and like her sons are listed. She had two sons. So the concubines, or the second class wives, had 4 of the 12 sons. So the sons of Reuven were Hanoch, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Shimon, the second of Leah's sons, were Yemuel, Yamin, Ohad, Yachin, Zohar, and Shaul. Shaul, it looks like he was the son of a Canaanite woman. So, yeah, so does that imply that Shimon had a Canaanite wife, or maybe what do they call them, concubines, or just a random, like one night stand with a woman? Anyway, Shaul seems to be that kind. Now, I want to give you a little Hebrew lesson here. If you would like to know how to pronounce these Hebrew names, there are a few rules that you can go by. First of all, like with the name Shaul that we have here, in English, you would call that Shaul. You would combine the A and the U together, as I think they're called diphthongs or blends or something like that in English. But Hebrew does not have that. So in Hebrew, you pronounce every vowel separately. So this name would be pronounced Sha'ul, Sha'ul. So you pronounce both the A and the U. Also, something to keep in mind, that the R's in Hebrew are not like ers, like we Hoosiers say like my name is Shriner, and it sounds goofy, especially if you hear some Hebrew. The R is pronounced in like the back of the throat. So my name in Hebrew would be Shriner. This is Zohar, not Zohar. It's Zohara. And also the I sound in Hebrew is like a long E. It's an een. Yamin, Yachin. So like the model word for pronouncing Hebrew stuff is the English word sister, and it would be sister. Sister. So pronounce all the vowels, get the I's right and get the R's right, and you're going to sound like an Israeli. Okay, the sons of Levi were Gershon, Kohat, and Merari. Merari. Two R's in there. So a lot of back throat stuff there. Now, these guys are going to play a prominent role because Levi is chosen to be the tribe that will produce the religious leaders. And at the top of that are going to be the priests. And the priests will all come from the tribe of Aaron. Well, Aaron doesn't actually have a tribe. From the family of Aaron. Aaron will be the first high priest, and he's the brother of Moses. So all of the priests, the high priest and the ordinary priests will be the descendants of Aaron. But within this family of Levi, you have these three sons, Gershon, Kohat, and Merari, who will be will produce the Levites. Now, Aaron comes from the tribe of Levi also, but it's a specialized family. So these three families, Gershon, Kohat, and Merari, will be the Levites who assisted the priests in the worship institution of Israel as it develops, generations later under the law of Moses. So the Levites will be choir members. They will be instrumental musicians. They will assist with the sacrifices, doing setup and cleanup and stuff like that. They will each have important rules because the first worship facility that God gives is the tabernacle, which is another way of saying a tent. So the tent has furniture inside it. So one of these tribes is designated to transport all the vessels, like the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, the table of showbread, the laver, and the two altars, the incense altar, and then the altar of burnt offerings, the Nehoshet altar. Each tribe will have different responsibilities, and there will be like a linen fence around the place. So, one of the tribes will be responsible for all the like linen coverings. Maybe it's the same tribe or a different tribe. All the structures like the tent poles and the boards on the walls and stuff like that. So these three tribes will have three different responsibilities in the worship of the people. So then verse 12, the sons of Yehuda or Judah were and I'm trying to say that right, Onan, and Shelah. And back in, what was it, Genesis 38, these two guys died. Yehuda hooked these guys up with Tamar. Tamar was their legitimate wives. So Tamar married and died and didn't leave any descendants. So Onan became the Levirate. He was the one who had the responsibility as the second oldest to marry Tamar and raise up at least one child for his brother but he died before he had any children. And also, we got into a rather lengthy discussion in Genesis 38 about Onan spilling his seed on the ground, his semen on the ground, and talking about whether a masturbation or coitus interruptus, having the pleasure of a woman and then withdrawing before the emission occurs, whether those are sinful practices or not. And I think the conclusion that we came to there, I hope it's what I'm going to tell you now. I think the conclusion we came to now was that the reason God struck Onan dead is because he did not fulfill his responsibility to raise up children for his brother. And then Shelah was younger, too young to marry Tamar, and probably a good thing for him because that means that he survived. So yeah, and Onan died. Shelah did not marry Tamar, and that fact um, kind of got Yehuda in trouble because Tamar disguised herself as a prostitute and had relations with Judah and produced these two guys, Peretz and Zerah. So Judah had his own wife, but these are the sons that are listed here in the genealogy. And because these two are gone, Shelah was born of Judah's actual wife. Peretz and Zerah were born of Tamar. But in the genealogies of Yeshua, it is Peretz that's listed as the eldest son. So we don't know we don't know what role Shelah plays in this thing. But Peretz seems to be the one that God chose to be in the genealogy of Yeshua. So it's not always the firstborn that is privileged by God. Oftentimes, maybe more often than not, it is one of the younger children. It will be the youngest twin that God favors. It will be the younger brother that God favors. And then the scripture here tells us that and Onan died in the land of Canaan. And here again, in English, we say Canaan, but it is Ka, Na, An. So there are three A's in this word, and you pronounce all three of them. Okay. The sons of Peretz were Hezron and Hamul. Let me go to Hezron here. When it comes to H sounds, there is a hard H, which is called a chet. And that's the one where you kind of get some gravel. Hezron, not Hezron, but Hezron. And Hamul is also a chet. When we come across some regular H words, hey words, then we'll pronounce those with a softer H sound. The sons of Issachar were Tola, Huvah, and Job. There is no J in Hebrew. This is another Hebrew thing. So whenever you see a J sound in English, it probably represents this little tiny letter right underneath my my mouse thing. It looks like an apostrophe in English, but it is a Y sound. It is the first letter in the sacred name, Yahweh. It is the first letter in Jesus' name, Yeshua. So it's the Y sound. So the name isn't pronounced Job anyway. It's Yov. So this name is pronounced Yov. But there's a famous Job in the Bible. And Dake even references this guy, says this is perhaps the one mentioned in the book of Job. That is a possibility. If that's true, then we have a time frame for when Job lived. So Job was within the time frame of the patriarchs, and he was a son of Issachar. By the way, there are two S's in the name Issachar, and they, according to the vowels here, they should both be pronounced, but they're not pronounced. It's usually Issachar with one S. If it was pronounced that way, then one of these Sheen, it's the letter C, actually seen, should not be in the text, but there should be a dagesh or a dot in the other one to indicate that one of the sheens is not pronounced, but it's represented by the dagesh. And there's no dagesh here. So I pronounce this name the way it's written, Isaskar, Isasakar, Is Isasakar. But actually, I mean, there should be another little T underneath it to pronounce it the way I do. So it's either Issachar or Isaskar. So that would be the tribal ancestor. If Job from the book of Job, we can put him in that time frame. I think the biblical Job lived probably much earlier than this family. A lot of scholars, and I'm one of them, believe that Job was the first book of the Bible written because Job lived before the patriarchs. One kind of critical thing is that this Yov in the family of Issachar is written with the Hebrew letters Yud, Vav, Bet, those three letters. In the book of Job, it's written with an Aleph. So there are actually four letters, or maybe not. Maybe the Vav isn't in there. But anyway, in the book of Job, it starts with an Aleph. So it's Aleph, Yod, Bet, or Aleph, Yod, Vav, Bet. So it's spelled differently. So if the different spelling of that Job and this Job is significant, then this is not the Job of the book of Job. But in Hebrew, the same name can be spelled two different ways. So it could be the Job of the book of Job, or it could not be. It could, I think it could go either way. And then the last name here is Shimron. The sons of Zvulun were Sered, and that is spelled with a Samek instead of a Sere. So it's Sered, Elon, and Yahleel. Yahleel. These were the sons of Leah. So I mentioned earlier that the genealogy is broken down by the four women who bore these children. Leah was the what? The first wife to bear children to Yaakov, whom she bore to Yaakov in Padan Aram. The main city there where they lived in Padan Aram was Haran. So Jacob spent pretty much a generation, 20 years up there in Padan Aram. He had to kind of run away from his brother because his brother wanted him dead for a while. Fortunately, I think they were reunited, but I think their relationship was tense after that. With his daughter Dinah. So Leah bore Dinah. Leah was the mother of Dinah, the well-known and mentioned daughter in the Bible. Let's see what Dake has to say about that. Leah's sons are mentioned first because she was the first to have children by Yaakov. Zilpah's are listed next because she was Leah's handmaid. So Dake's just saying what I said about this. All the persons, his sons and his daughters were 33. So Leah has a total of 33 sons and grandsons. Maybe Dinah is counted in there also. I'm not sure. If you want to know, go count all the names and see if Dinah is one of the, 33 or not. The sons of God, and this is pronounced as if it was a kind of a O sound. God, not Gad, as we would say in English. So it's God, were Ziphion, Hagi, Shuni, Etzvon, Eri, Aodi, and Aeli. And a lot of these names have Hebrew significance, like Areli, well, it could mean a lot of things. Or could be like a light, a reference to light, and Eli, like my God is light, or God is my enlightenment, something like that. I'm not going to spend too much time on the Hebrew meanings of these names. The sons of Asher. So Gad and Asher were the sons of Zilpah. The sons of Asher were Yimnah, Ish Ua, Ish Ui, Beriah, and Serah, their sister. So Serah seems to be a sister. So maybe the women are counted. And the sons of Beriah were Hever and Malchiel, which probably means something to do like with a messenger or something like that. These were the sons of Zilpah, whom Lavan, remember the father of uh, Rachel and Leah, gave to Leah, his daughter. And these she bore to Yaakov 16 persons instead of Leah's 33. So those are the two of the groups. The sons of Rachel, Yaakov's wife, were Yosef and Binyamin. So Yosef was the firstborn. He was born up in Padan Aram. Benjamin was born in Canaan, but alas, Rachel died in childbirth. So poor Yaakov was deprived of his favorite wife, and there was no doubt that she was his favorite. And then when Yosef is sold into slavery, Yaakov thinks he's dead, and Benjamin becomes his favorite. And to Yosef in the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt, were born Manasseh and Ephraim. And their mom's name was Asinat, whom Asinat, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore to him. Now, when we looked at the map, On was one of the locations down along the Nile, and that's where Potipharah was a priest. And Asenath, his daughter, was married to Yosef. That doesn't necessarily mean that Yosef was living in or around On. Doesn't necessarily mean he moved there, but that's where this daughter that he married, I guess, was probably born. The sons of Benjamin were Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Ehi, Rosh, Mupim, Chupim, and Arad. Now, when I was talking about Issachar before, here are a couple of, let's talk about Mupim. Mupim is spelled Mem, Pe, Yod, Mem. And there is a U sound under the Mem, so it's Mu-Pim, but notice there is a little dot in the Pe or the P sound, which is an indication that the English spelling is probably correct, that originally there were two P's in this name, Mapop or something like that. But one of the P's disappeared and went into this one and left that dogish there. So Mupim. The same is true of Hupim. There's a dogish or a dot in the middle of that Pe or P sound. So I think the English is correct because the English supplies us with two P's in both names. And that's indicated by the dogish in the Hebrew. And then Arad. Arad, which kind of means to go down. These were the sons of Rachel who were born to Yaakov, 14 persons in all. The son of Dan was Hushim. Now we're getting into the sons of the last concubine or second level wife, Zilpah. Rachel's maidservant. The sons of Dan, the son of Dan was Hushim. The sons of Naphtali were Yaziel. Yaziel. The Yah, J-A-H there, is usually a reference to the shortened name of Yahweh. But over here, the H in Yahaziel is a chet, meaning back of the throat and not front of the mouth. So that is not a reference to the shortened name of the sacred name of God. Guni, Yezer, and Shilem. These were the sons of Bilhah, whom Lavan gave to Rachel, his daughter, and she bore these to Yaakov, 7 persons in all. Small family because Rachel was only around to bear 2 children. All the persons who went with Yaakov to Mitzrayim, to Egypt, who came from his body, besides Yaakov's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. So when it says besides Yaakov's sons' wives, let me see that in the Hebrew. Milvad in Hebrew, besides, milvad. That seems to indicate to me that the wives, the women in this genealogy, are not counted, or at least not normatively counted. So there we've got 66 persons. Keep the 66 in mind. And the sons of Yosef, who were born to him in Mitzrayim, were 2 persons. All of the persons of the house of Yaakov who went to Egypt were 70. So Yosef and his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, did not go to Canaan with the brothers when they traveled to Canaan to collect their father and load up all their stuff in carts. Yosef and his sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, were not with them. So 66 people were in the caravan, and so Yosef and his 2 sons is 3 more, which adds up to 69. So where do we get the 70? Who's the 70th person? The 70th person is Yaakov himself. The genealogy is the sons of Yaakov, 69 of them, and then Yaakov is number 70. And Dake says something here. He makes a reference to Stephen's kind of historical like review of biblical history in his speech in Acts chapter 7, just before he's put to death. But it says, this is said to distinguish, out of the loins, besides Yaakov's wives, this is said to distinguish the 66 from the 70 souls of Genesis 46:27. 75 mentioned by Stephen. The 66 didn't include Jacob or Yosef and his 2 sons in Egypt, whereas the 70 did. So here again, if you want to count up all the names there, the 75 included 5 grandsons of Yosef, sons of Manasseh and Ephraim. And then he says, see note in Acts 7:14. I'm not going to go to that because I don't care that much. So anyway, these numbers do work out. This is not a contradiction. It's not a miscounting in the Bible. It could be the way that I said here. I think that makes sense. It could be the way Dake said it here, including 5 grandsons, sons of Manasseh and Ephraim. I think either way, or maybe both, because I believe Stephanos, I believe he does mention 75 people. So that would be including the descendants of Manasseh and Ephraim. Okay. And the sons of Yosef who were born to him in Egypt were 2 persons. All the persons of the house of Yaakov were 70. So In verse 28, then he sent Yehuda before him to Yosef to point out before him the way to Goshen, and they came to the land of Goshen. So he sent Yehuda. So who sent Yehuda? Looks like it was Yaakov. And Dake says Joseph was, verse 28 here. Jacob's choice of Yehuda. Jacob may have chosen Yehuda because he was the one who tried to save Joseph from death when Joseph was sold, and had been the spokesman when pleading for Benjamin after Benjamin was found with the cup of Yosef, the divining cup of Yosef. So maybe. Or Yehuda had natural traits which made him a good leader, one to be trusted. And I mean, if that's true and those traits are inherited, then his descendants would make good kings. In prophecy, he was destined to have chief place among the brethren. His was to be the ruling tribe through whom the Messiah would come and rule the nations forever. In history, Yehuda had the ruling part in Israel, from David to Babylonian captivity. He's just going into some chronological stuff there. So that's enough on sending Yehuda, the ancestor of the Messiah. And they came to the land of Goshen. So Yosef made ready his chariot, and he went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. And he presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. So this is the first meeting of Joseph and Yaakov, and both of them are going to be very emotional about this reunion, and it'll just be such a tremendous blessing to both of them. And Israel said to Yosef, now the Bible's calling him Israel. He said to Yosef, now let me die, since I have seen your face, because you are still alive. For some reason, this expression of Israel kind of reminds me of the expression of Shimon, who was in the temple and saw Jesus when he was pretty much a newborn. Joseph and Mary brought him to the temple to redeem him and for Mary's to offer a sacrifice for Mary's cleansing. And Shimon had been given a promise by God that he would live to see the Messiah. And when he sees Jesus, he knows that this is the Messiah. I think God revealed it to him. So he says, Lord, now let your servant depart in peace. And what he's saying is, now let me die. I've seen the Messiah. You fulfilled your promise. That's all I could ask for in this life. So now I'm ready to die. And so, yeah, that's what Yosef is saying here. I've seen my son. I know you're alive. I've been reunited with you. I love you. But now it's okay for me to die. Then Yosef said to his brothers and his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh and say to him, my brothers and those of my father's house who were in Canaan, who were in the land of Canaan, have come to me. And he's going to go on to say, and the men are shepherds, for their occupation has been to feed livestock, and they have brought their flocks, their herds, and all that they have. So it shall be when Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? That you shall say, your servant's occupation has been with livestock from our youth. In other words, for generations, even till now. Both we and our fathers, that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, which for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. So let's say Joseph was living down in On. I'm going to go back to the map here. I'm going to try to bring that map back up. So here's Goshen. Here's Goshen. I'm circling it with my pointer. I don't know anything about Avaris. That's where the map shows Joseph living. But here's On, since On, or Heliopolis, which is Greek, is mentioned in the Bible. Let's say Joseph has been living here, or maybe in Noph or Memphis. So somewhere in this region, or maybe somewhere else. What Joseph does not want to happen is for his family members to be living in the place where he's been living. And there may be a number of reasons for that. One may be that the land of Egypt was a land of pagan religions, and he didn't want his father father and his brothers and their families to be influenced by paganism and by Egyptian customs and things like that. He has probably had to battle, like do spiritual battle with that stuff all the time that he's been in Egypt. So that may be kind of a thing. The other thing is, well, and it's related. Joseph may well understand that God wants to, through childbirth, develop this extended family into a nation. Um, wants the population to be large enough to be considered a nation. And he wants to do that in an isolated area so the family can stay together. And that isolated area seems to be Goshen. Now, the other thing is that we are told in this text that the profession of shepherding and herding livestock is an abomination to the Egyptians. So if Joseph wanted his family living with him wherever he's been living, then he would probably tell his family members to say you're something other than a shepherd, because the reaction of the Egyptians is going to be, well, I'm glad that Yosef is reunited with his family, but they're shepherds, and we just don't want to have anything to do with them because they're an abomination. So if Joseph wanted his family members living with him where he was living, he would have said, say you're carpenters or say you're plumbers or something like that. But don't say you're shepherds because that's an abomination. But he wants them living in isolation, either again, to avoid contamination by the pagan Egyptian customs and religious beliefs, and to allow them to develop like as a family unit with biblical principles and values, although the Bible hasn't been written yet, with godly morals and values and principles. And Joseph realizes that needs to take place in isolation. So how is he going to get Pharaoh to assign them to a place of isolation? Well, he doesn't even have to lie. All he has to do is tell Pharaoh that they're shepherds, and Pharaoh is going to go, well, that's great, but I'm not living in close proximity to them. So Joseph or Pharaoh or whoever chooses Goshen as the place. And he emphasizes that he wants his family members to remind Pharaoh that they're shepherds so they can live in an isolated land. I think that is all of that's all of chapter 46. So let me give you a New Testament blessing here. We'll just do it in English. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all. So shalom, shalom, and I hope we will see you next time when we will take up Genesis 47.